Hello architects and welcome back to another RPG Architect tutorial. My name is Bert and today we are going to be diving into character creation. So we'll be setting up our hero, maybe a couple other party members just to have in place for when we get into the UI section, get into UI building and creating out our battle systems. So let's go ahead and go to Tools, Database, or you can press F8. Full screen this, and by default it starts off on characters, but if you don't see it, then just scroll up to the very top on the left side here and you have the characters option. Now in our first video we set up a hero character and we just gave him this one sprite, and that's basically all we've done. But just going through these core options here, we have our character name. We can set up a portrait, his sprite, his battle sprite or model. You can do 3D models for either the overworld or the battle sprite. You also have a couple spots for animations and our collider shape. So let's start off by giving this character a portrait. Now before I can do anything here, I actually don't have any portraits in my resource folders here. Well, I've got portraits, but these are basically for enemies that were imported with the Tyler Warren packs, but I don't have anything for heroes. So I'm gonna hit OK. I'm gonna hit this folder in the top right corner to open up our game directory. I'm gonna go to content. I'm gonna click portraits, and here's all the existing ones. And I'm actually going to import these ones from Final Boss Blues. First, just to keep things organized, I'm gonna create a couple new folders. I'll call this one Tyler Warren Monsters, and I'm gonna drag all these guys in there. Just drop them in there, and then I'll create another one called Final Boss Blues, FBB Heroes, and I will drag all of these, copy them into there, okay? I can close both of these, go back to our database, hitting F8, go to our main character, portrait, and now when I click on portrait, I have my two folders I created. I'm gonna click FBB Heroes, and then we will find our character. Now I believe we are using character 2 sprite sheets, so it should be this guy here. I just want to select his square, so I'm going to do the full block here. See, frame height is 288, so if we cut that in half, 144, and these are square images, so we're going to do 144 here, and now we can select any one we want. Maybe we should make our hero this guy, actually. This epic bearded man. He will be our main hero. So that is our portrait, and now, of course, we want to switch our sprite character to that corresponding character. So let's switch to him. And if you don't remember how to set up your sprite exactly, over here on the right side, you can click this button up here. It sets the sprite to be a singular image, so it basically selects the entire sprite sheet here. And then you select the amount of directions, so 4 directions, 3 frames, because there is up, down, left, right. And then you just have to set your frame width and height, which I believe was 26 by 36, yeah. And then you select whichever grouping that you want, right? And if you're not using Final Boss Blues' stuff, if you have different dimensions for your sprite sheets, you'll just have to find the right value. But the idea is to get all the entire walk cycle in your selection box, right? So let's select that guy. We can set up our battle sprite model as well. I'm gonna click on this and then select battlers on the left side, and this is character 2-4. Now with this, you might be tempted to select the full sprite sheet like we did with the walking. However, we'll have to define these other stances, these other animations in another section of the database under battles. We will get to that at a later date, but for right now, let's just set our frames to be these first 3 pictures, so like his neutral stance, right? So I'm just gonna set my frame count to 3 and my frame width and height to 48 to select just these 3. And I'm gonna hit OK. And now we have our battle stance in place. Again, we will come back to this during our battle tutorials, but we just have it in place for right now. Idle animation and falling animations, you set up over here on the left under character animation. We'll resize just a couple of spots here, and we'll go over this as well at another point. But basically, if you have like a Sonic, you think of Sonic, how if you just don't touch the controller, he starts tapping his foot and like looking at the screen and stuff when he's idle. You could set up an animation like that here, and you can specify if it's a model like a 3D animation or if it is a sprite animation. You can adjust the frame count, the duration, edit the animation, all the above, and then name them something like idle. Falling you might not need so much in a top-down RPG like we are working on here, but if you define your animations over here, come back, then you can choose them from the list here. Got it? Now, as for our collision shape, setting up your character's collision, we generally recommend using capsule. Of course, you can experiment with whatever shape you want, but it is highly recommended to go with capsule. If you're doing a different style game, then maybe one of the others will be more applicable to you. But you can see as you select the different types, you get different dimensions you can define, like box has width, depth, height. Capsule just has diameter and height. Cylinder is diameter and height. Sphere is just a diameter. I'm not gonna lie, I have not messed with convex hull at all. I'm not sure what this does, so I'm gonna ignore that one for right now. We'll come back to it at a later date. But let's set capsule. Let's just do our diameter 1 and our height 1, just to keep it simple for right now. You can play with these values if you would like, and really lock in your collider shape. Now below this, we have another section where you can define classes, equipment slots, item types, and skill types. Classes obviously is your character class. If you have them as just a neutral, everybody's a blank slate, you don't really have to do this. But if you want to define specific classes for specific characters, you can hit the plus button, and then you have a selection here. And then this is based upon our classes tab. So we'll just create 3, just give them names just so you can see, but call this warrior, we'll do healer, and we'll do a mage. And we're not going to go into stat changes or anything like that, but for each class, if you want the class to override your base character's portrait or sprite or whatever, say they get a different costume when they change classes, like something like Final Fantasy Tactics or Final Fantasy V, you can define those here. And then you can change the stats and traits and stuff over on this right side. That is for a different tutorial, but I'm just going to show here that you can create classes and then add here the class warrior. Now he is a warrior, and he starts as a warrior at rank or level 0, okay? Now, equipment slots, you have to also define over here on the items section, there is the equipment slots tab. So if we click on that, and we'll resize to something like 5, this is where you define the types of equipment slots we have. So if we name them something like weapon, shield, armor, helmet, accessory. This is where you define what kind of equipment slots the character has available. If you want to do 2 accessory items, you can. If you want to do just a weapon and armor, that's fine. You can define it however you want. You can also set it to where these slots cannot be empty. So if you have a default sword or something for a character, you can check that box for each character, but then for an accessory, you might want that to be an open slot. You just leave that unchecked. You set an icon for each equipment slot. Once we have our icon sheet set up, we'll do that at a later point. And then you can set up grouping categories as basically a way to help yourself stay organized throughout all this. But we're just going to keep, we'll dive into this as we start filling out our equipment and item systems in this project. But we're just going to leave this right now: weapon, shield, armor, and helmet. And we come back over here to our hero, and we can check under equipment slots and see that these are now available. So we will go ahead and check all of these. And now he can equip all these. So you may be tempted to say, if I have a mage character that I don't want to be able to equip shields, to uncheck this. However, if you do it this way, that might throw off things in your UI building later, because this is essentially the equip slots, like how they'll display on your UI. And so generally when you see those, say again for the mage, the shield slot will still be there, they just won't be able to equip anything. So you can do it this way if you want, but generally the way that you define the type of equipment a character can use is more under item types. So go ahead and check shield again, and let's go into item types. Much like classes and equipment slots, item types will be defined over here under item types. Click here, let's resize. Let's go ahead and add a few slots. I'll do like 8. Now you can set different item types such as like healing or consumable. This is just where we're making consumable. This is where we're making the categories for things. You could do as specific or as vague as you want. You can do magic scrolls, if that's a type of item you want to do, like attack magic items. You could do mix items if you have a character like Riku from Final Fantasy X, who she specifically can use certain components to mix items into like another attack item, something like that. You could define those here. But then you can also define things like great sword, staff, heavy armor, light armor, things like that. This is where you can kind of get more in depth with your item types, as the name states. Heavy shield,
We can do boots, make that like an accessory maybe. Accessory, whatever. The idea being that you set up your item types here. You would define the items themselves under this item category and or equipment. This is where we actually go into depth with what each of these are. But when we go back to our character and we go under item types, this is where we can say, okay, he can use things, consumable items like potions. He can use attack magic scrolls. He cannot use the Riku style mix items or something. He does use a great sword. He cannot use a staff. He can equip heavy and light armor. He can equip a shield. He can't equip boots for some reason, but he can equip an accessory. Things like that. Equipment slots determines the slots that are going to be available for your character to equip items, and then the items, the types themselves, determines what can actually go there, okay? And then lastly, skill types. Much like these previous 3 sections, we're gonna come over here to the left, go to skill types to set up the options here. Go to skill types. We'll do like 5 slots. This is where you define the options that a character can use when they're in battle, essentially. So you might want to do something like, for the first skill, attack, do defend, magic, tech, like technique, do flee, maybe do one more for, I'll make 4 item, I'll make 5 flee, okay? So here is where you define the skill types, and then at a later point we'll go into skills, but you can set a category for these skills. You can define what kind of skill type they are. So if you have multiple like magic skills, you'd set them up here. You just put them in the magic category. If you have multiple physical skills, you can set them up here, and that sort of thing. But then coming back to our hero, going to skill types, you can determine what kind of skills he uses. So he can use the attack command in battle. He can use the defend command in battle. He cannot use the magic command in battle, but he can do physical techniques. He can use items, he can flee. So that's how you can set up get started setting up the commands that your characters will have in battle. So that's it for this column. Over here on the right though, you'll see we have statistics, traits, and tags. Now statistics we can't really set up until we go over to the left, and you guessed it, we go to statistics. Statistics is where we define stuff like, I'll just do 8 slots. I don't know how many I need exactly. This is where we'll define our stats, or the stats that are used in our game. So stuff like level. You could also call it rank, or whatever. We'll call it level because that's pretty standard. You'd set up your experience. You could set your, you want your HP stat. You want MP, or you could call AP or something, or BP, whatever. Strength. Yeah, I'll actually list it out as strength because we give them a name here. Defense, we'll do magic. We'll do magic defense, so M defense. Let's do a couple more slots. Actually, maybe just one is fine. We'll do speed. So you give them a name here, but then I'll go back up to the top to level. We need to define a category. So each of these has a different type of category, right? You select this, you have core, rank, growth, and store, and calculated. So depending on what the stat is, what you need out of it, you'll have to change the category. So something like level is a rank, and if you had class levels, you would change it to rank, etc. Yeah, something like class level or mercenary level. So your standard RPG level kind of thing, that is your rank. That is the category you want. Experience is a growth category because as you gain more of this, it like grows your character. Like you get to a point and then you get an increase in rank. So experience, skill points, I guess you could say, you'd want to set growth. Things like HP and MP, these are store categories because you have a max and a minimum HP. So it's something that can be depleted and restored. And the rest of these will all be set to core statistics because these don't have a maximum minimum that deplete through the battle and then get restored and stuff like that. They don't level up your character as you get more of them, anything like that. So anything that's just kind of a base stat, you label as core. The only one I didn't go over is calculated. Now calculated, I'll go to this empty slot here. Calculated, you can create a formula specifically for this stat. Now I have not messed with this much, but I'm assuming, say you wanted like a wisdom stat and it had to be based upon, we'll just say magic and magic defense calculates your wisdom stat. Like you could put in a formula here that takes those others into account. I believe that's how that works. I could be wrong, so I apologize if I am, but calculated, you can put in a specific formula for that stat in this section, right? And then the last thing I want to do here before we go back to our character screen is we need to set our formula names, and we need to set minimums and maximums. So for our rank, the formula name is LVL. And so this is when we need to reference the character's level, this is what we need to type in is LVL. So for experience, we're going to put in EXP, HP, and MP. We're going to put in HP and MP, strength, defense, magic. These are all going to get abbreviations. We'll go through them real quick here. For level, it is LVL. For experience, we have EXP. For HP, we just have HP. MP is MP. Strength is STR, defense is DEF, magic is MAG, magic defense is MDF, and speed is SPD. And you can use whatever formula names you want for these. These are just going to create variables to reference for when we are setting up our growth formulas in the character database. Now we also just have to set up our minimum and maximum values for each individual one, and they're pretty self-explanatory. I think you could figure them out. Minimum and maximum value, and a default value is the value of the statistic when it has not been initialized. So pretty self-explanatory. The only thing to note is that for stuff like HP and MP, make sure you set your minimum to 0 because you want your characters to be able to be knocked out or run out of magic. Okay, and I've gone through and set up minimum and maximums for each stat. And so for level, I did 1 for minimum, 99 for max. For experience, I set 0 for minimum, 99,999 for maximum. You can always change that. No telling how much experience you'll gain through a game. HP and MP, I just did 0 for HP, 9,999. For MP, I did 999, and then everything below, all the core stats, I did 10 for minimum, and maximum I did 255. Just throwing values out, nothing too crazy. Okay. And now, if we come back over to our character, under our statistics tab, we can set our rank. What are we using to define our rank? We're going to use our level. What are we using to define our rank growth? We are using experience. Now when you do that, this pops up and you can see there's a column for HP, MP, strength, defense, magic, M defense, and speed, as well as level and experience, right? And then right up above that, we have a minimum and maximum rank. So if we set it to 10 more spots come in. If we set it to 50, then we get 50 spots, and 99, of course, 99. You can also import or export sheets like this. So if you somehow got your hands on the character growth stats of like Cloud from Final Fantasy VII and you defined all your stats exactly the way they did, you could theoretically import the exact stat growth of like your favorite characters into RPGA. You just have to have it in a CSV format and labeled out appropriately, but it is doable. So you may be noticing, well, I got this all filled out, but all the values are at 0. So what you do here is you'll notice up above in each column, there's this little calculator icon. And when you click on these, this is where you enter in the formula for how this particular stat grows. So you'll see down here, there's a lot of functions. There's a couple constants. You can use pi. I know that one. I can't remember what E is. I think that equals MC squared or something. But at the top here, you can put in a formula for things to follow. And then you see down here are the variables which we defined in our statistics section. You'll also notice since we did store for our HP and our MP, we have max underscore HP and max underscore MP are also variables that were created. But we are on experience, so I'm not really a huge math guy, to be honest with you. This is a little bit above my pay grade. I don't know what all these things do. I know Tan is going off on a tangent, something like that, but what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna harness the power of computers and just have the computer figure out a formula for me. So I asked online, and the formulas I was given was something along the lines of, we're on experience 100 times LVL, so 100 times our character's level, and then we can do times 5, something like that. So 100 times the level, and then that value times 5. So if I hit OK, you'll see this fills out here. Not exactly the best formula, I know, but it's just something to get the point across so you guys can come up with a much better formula. You can actually also do decimal points. So let's say we wanted to do something that looked a little bit more natural, not just these nice even growths here. Let's do 5.2, and now you get a more natural looking progression that you might see. Again, may not be the best formula, but it is something. So for level 1, you need 520 experience. For level 2, you need 1040. Level 3, 1560, so on and so forth. We also are going to do the same thing for our HP formula. For HP, we're just going to do 50 times LVL. and we'll just get a little bit of a health increase as we go. Again, maybe not the best formula. It's fine for now. MP, he's not going to be a very strong mage, so we'll just do 10 times LVL, and so on and so forth. You just come up with formulas, you pop them in here, and then it fills them out accordingly. So I'm going to do that with the remaining stats, and we will pop back in here. Okay, there we go. And I have all these formulas plugged in. I'll just pop them up on screen. That was my strength. Here's my defense. 12 plus 7 times L. Again, these are just what I was given. There's definitely better formulas we can use, but for the purpose of this video, just pop your formulas in here and it'll fill out your stats. You might have to do a little bit of balancing after the fact, but that's how you do that. Last couple things I'll go over is I'll jump to traits. I showed this briefly on the first video, but you can set up a couple of physical property traits to increase your character's speed. You have X, Y, and Z values. You can also, under this, I'll do a new one here, physical property. You can also adjust the encounter scale, his physical collision, gravity, set up if he's static, set up if light, set up some light settings for this character in particular. There's a lot of little physical things you can do. You can adjust the scale of the sprite here. If you want the character to be just a little bit bigger, for instance, and you decide to set it in here, that's an option. There's a lot of other things here you can set too. You can set elemental preferences. We don't have elementals set up yet, but say this was like a Chrono Cross, or a Chrono Trigger type game where you have elemental affinities. You could set them up here, set them how it affects the character as the user or as the target. You can set up different skill types here. You can add or remove them based upon your rank. So if you learn a skill at level 10, you can do add skill type at level 10 and then like drop it here. So if it's a special move, or if you want to have him hit amnesia when he hits level 20, you can remove a skill. Or say your character moves from Dark Knight to Paladin, you can remove skills, that sort of thing. Although that you might have to do something a little different with that since this is rank based. But you know what I'm saying. You can remove stuff there. Same thing. You can set item types here. What stuff you can use based on level. You can adjust global variables. Like if you hit level 10, you can adjust different variables. Set them to different values. Same thing with switches. Depending on rank, you can turn switches on and off. You can adjust equipment slots here, add or remove. You can set different skills here by rank. I said ranked in the last series too. That's so funny. You can adjust different skills here, their rank or their growth. We'll have to get into that at a later point. You can also adjust tile tags, how if a certain tile is passable or not. You can do that on level base, or you can just have it set to default 0. If any of these you want to have started from the get-go, you just have your rank set to 0, and you can just start, walking on different tiles or whatnot, stuff like that. Be sure to go through and check out all of these different traits you can add to your characters here under the traits tab. And then lastly, tags. This is where you can set things. Say you wanted to give him a title or something like the Amnesiac Hero, or something along those lines, or have the title add titles as you go, or something like that, or even other possibilities that I'm not thinking of right now. You can set tags in here and give them a value, and then refer to these tags at a later point in UI or in conversation and dialogue, that sort of thing. Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and set up a couple more characters, but I hope that helped. I hope that made sense. We went a bit of a deep dive in here, but I think that covered most everything I wanted to cover for this video. And again, we needed to do this before we could get to setting up our UI stuff, so probably for the best, we went ahead and knocked this out. I'm going to go ahead and set up the rest of the party. I guess we'll do this girl here, and then maybe this guy here. I don't know. We'll figure it out. I'll just go ahead and set up a couple characters to have in our party or when we hit the battle system. But that covered most of the character creator. Of course, there's a couple of other things that need to be fleshed out to have it fully done, but hopefully that gives you a better idea of how to use all this stuff, okay? Well, I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial. If you did, please leave a like and a comment. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. If you don't have your copy of RPG Architect, go ahead and pick one up today. We are still in early access. It is a fully functioning engine though. It has got a lot going for it already, and it's getting better every single day. So go ahead and grab your copy now while it is in early access and help give us feedback. Let us know what kind of things you want to see, okay? If you have any questions, you can feel free to leave them in the comments. I will do my best to answer them in a timely fashion, or if nothing else, I will direct Locke to your questions, because sometimes he's better at answering stuff than I am. Or you can hop in our Discord. There's a lot of community members there who have already gotten pretty acclimated with the engine and can help you out as well. Highly recommend it. Very, very friendly, very helpful community there. If you've enjoyed my commentary, if you've enjoyed this tutorial and you would like to support me further, and you'd like to get access to a ton of music to use in your project, please be sure to support me over at patreon.com/bitbybitsound. It is patreon.com/bitbybitsound. It helps me out a lot, helps me to be able to create these tutorials and create a ton of great music for you guys, okay? All right, that's going to do it for me today. You have been amazing. I have been Bert, and I will see you on the next one. Bye-bye.